This week is one of the toughest weeks of the year, simply because the sun is ingressing into Aquarius, it's conjoining Pluto, and it's really the symbol of like the lowest energy that we get throughout the winter. There are some positive transits this week in the astrology. However, they're going to come a little bit later in the week, and the beginning of this week is just going to feel really slow and dull. However, you can't let that get to you. We have a lot to talk about as the week continues, and there are some good things as the week comes to an end. So let's go ahead and get started talking about it. Welcome back to the Astrology Report. My name is Cam White. If you don't know me already, today we're talking about January 20th through January 26th of 2025. There's quite a bit of things to talk about real fast. Number one, what I find very fun about this weekly in particular is I'm recording this at 6 p.m. I usually record first thing in the morning, just, clarity of thought. You guys get that. I did not get any good sleep last night. Like, my eyes don't want to be open right now. And I find, I was like, I'm not going to do this, weekly. It's like Thursday night. Parker usually needs it by like Thursday night, if not Friday. Friday's cutting it short. I didn't want to do it now, but I was like, you know what? I'm tired, and that's a good energy to have probably for this weekly. Number two, I talked last week about having a rant or a tirade about the California wildfires, and I just decided not to do that because something that I'm personally working on is my reaction to seeing things in the news. And unfortunately, the fires in LA just kind of struck a chord. I grew up with the fire department. I have family in the fire department, friends in the fire department. The corruption and the misuses and the mismanagement of resources is just something that I was inundated with a lot as a child. And it's just not worth my energy to get all upset about. If you know, you know, and if you don't, you don't. What is there to know? There's a lot of mismanagement of use, a lot of mismanagement of resources. And that's pretty much it. And that's the name of the game. That's the end of the story. Second thing, as we get started talking about this week, what I actually want to talk about real fast is I did a podcast that I'm not going to put out because I want to refine it better. I just had an idea and I just spurted it out. And as I continued along, it wasn't really cohesive. I would rather give you guys a better piece of content, but I wanted to make sure I said this in case something happened. I want to actually pull up real quickly, the Sibley chart for America. If you're not familiar with this is essentially America's birth chart. This is just like you have a birth chart. Whenever transits hit your birth chart, something significant happens. Same idea here. Why this is important, though, that I wanted to bring about, I discovered this a couple days ago, maybe about last week, and I talked about this in this podcast that I'm not going to release. And the things that I talk about in the podcast, I'm going to talk about again at some point, and I'll have like a more cohesive. But why I'm bringing this up is we start Monday off with the inauguration. And if you look here, Mars is going to be retrograde on Mercury. Mercury rules the 10th whole sign house of the like the 10th house rules like the king of the nation that we're looking at a chart. Mars is going to be conjoining the 10th ruler in the 8th. This doesn't look that good. What's also really interesting about this is the South Node is going into the 10th house. I just noticed this as I pulled this up. If you have the South Node go through your 10th house, a lot of the times this can look like returning to an old job, and the fact that the South Node is going through America's 10th and we literally are returning back to an old president is really funny to me. But I'm looking at this Mars-Mercury conjunction that like, okay, is he going to die or is this going to be like a terrorist event? Who's to say? But this is there's at least one major astrological indicator that goes like, ugh, I'm not really liking Inauguration Day. Now, is that more symbolic? Is it not? I'm not really sure. And if you actually look at Trump's chart as well, and you look up Inauguration Day, Mars is going to be on top of his Saturn and his Venus. Not my favorite transit per se. So I just wanted to bring that up because I thought that was really interesting. So as now that I've kind of, talked about the whole inauguration thing, let's go ahead and jump into the week. So we start the week off on Monday with the moon in Libra, making a square to Mercury and then making a square to Mars. This is also not my favorite transit. The week really just starts off on a really low point. The sun does somewhat ingress into Aquarius. It's already kind of in Aquarius. I don't think the moon actually conjoins Pluto until Tuesday. But the words that I wrote down for this was like, when the moon's in Libra, right? It's very diplomatic. It's very trying to negotiate a deal. The moon making a square to Mercury in Capricorn is just like, you can't agree to the terms and conditions. The negotiation isn't working the way that you want to. Both parties can't reach, an exact conclusion that they want to. Part of me wonders how much of this comes up with TikTok and the sell of that. But the other part of it is after the moon makes a square to Mercury, it's going to then start applying to a square with Mars. And I don't like these moon Mars squares in Libra or in Aries. I don't like them really, period. Because the moon in Libra squaring Mars retrograde in Cancer reminds me when you see a parent who has a toddler who is screaming and yelling and crying, and they are pandering to the child. And I understand there are certain points, when it's just like, hey, you're just a parent, like, please shut the fuck up, kid. Here's a lollipop. Just stop embarrassing me. But there's other times where you understand you are rewarding a bad behavior. And so the thing that I want to talk about on Monday for you guys is there's going to be a negotiation factor with what you're doing. Like Mercury's in Capricorn, right? Like you have a specific plan, you have a specific way of looking at things. And the moon in Libra is like, well, does it really have to be that way? Does it have to really be this way? And there is a level of like you negotiating with yourself. And I wonder, again, I don't look at anything as good or bad. It's mostly like dependent on your situation. For some people, you negotiate out of the things that you say that you're going to do. Like, a term I really like is non-negotiable. Like if you have goals, if you have a certain, set of ambitions, whatever it is, they have to be non-negotiable. You can't say, oh, well, I don't feel like it today, or, oh, well, this and this and that. It has to be non-negotiable. So there's going to be a lot of you that shouldn't actually be negotiating with yourselves. And again, you're not going to like that, right? You're going to go, oh, but I want to. Like, for example, I'm so tired right now, but I'm fucking going to the gym. I don't really want to go to the gym. I really actually want to go to bed, but it's like 6 p.m. I don't want to wake up at like 5 yet. Anyway, that's a whole other story. Anyway, I'm saying that because the moon will then start applying to Mars. And this is also, again, like indecision, feeling insecure about which way to really turn. And so for a lot of you, again, you might actually have to say, you know what, I need to change my mind. I need to change my plan. There's the plan that you have, and then there's what ends up working out for you. And again, sometimes you have to change that plan. So I think Monday is just, you got to know what's going to be the best thing for you. Is that going to be changing the plan, or is that going to be not negotiating with yourself? And I think either way, by the evening throughout Monday, you are going to have some emotional turmoil about the decision that you made. And is it the right one? Are you, pandering to what other people want, or do you need to like steadfast hold on to yourself? And that brings us to Tuesday, because Tuesday actually kind of revisits this theme. On Tuesday, the moon is going to ingress into Scorpio, and it's going to make a square to Pluto. And then we have the sun conjoining Pluto and Aquarius. Tuesday's a really interesting day. I think the idea that Trump's getting inaugurated with the sun conjoining Pluto is interesting to me. I don't really want to be like, well, this is what it means. And the reason I say that is, well, okay, is the sun conjoining Pluto this? And again, I've talked a lot about Pluto and Aquarius being very fear and corruption within the Aquarius stuff. That's going to be technology, society, big groups of people. The sun is our willpower and our identity, and it's in detriment in Aquarius, where again, we can't stand out. When everyone's special, no one is. That's the whole idea of like the sun in Aquarius. Like you can't be an individual amongst the sea of all of these people that all uniquely identify themselves the same way. And so the sun conjoining Pluto, I look at this as a few ways. Is one, there's going to feel like a sense of defeat. There's going to feel like the sense of like, oh, well, this is what everybody else says, so I don't want to say anything. And like, for example, I have a platform, like I'm on YouTube. There's things I want to say all the time, but YouTube wouldn't like that. And is it worth, risking my platform? Is it worth, again, same thing with the fire stuff. Like I get so upset watching some of this shit, but it's not even really worth the energy. It doesn't mean I'm trying to censor myself or anything like that, but it's just, I don't want that energy being taken away from me. On another level though, what I do like about the sun conjoining Pluto is there is this sense of, when you are downtrodden, when you are not able to access all of the energy and the willpower that you have, there are other people there that can support you. Now, what's hard is understanding the Pluto and Aquarius dynamic. Like not everyone's on your side. Like something I learned the hard way when I was really popular on Twitter was, oh, everyone wanted to be my friend. And then when it was the second it was cool for it to not be my friend, all of those people that said they were my friend who, I had dinners with, invited to my house, shared intimate, stories with, all of a sudden decided it wasn't cool to be my friend anymore. And they weren't my friend. And so I look at this kind of dynamic as, again, you got to tread at your own pace here and look at how it's going to be affecting your life. The moon's going to go into Scorpio though. And so with the moon going into Scorpio, I'm going to label this as a much more emotionally turbulent day. there's this, the moon is, it's how we feel. And the moon in Scorpio, it reminds me of, if you've been online for a long time, there's a kid who got his like Xbox taken away, or his World of Warcraft. And he has this tantrum in his bedroom and he ends up shoving his TV remote up his ass. Real ones know that video. If not, it might be funny. I don't know. It's like, I saw that video not that long ago, and it was just one of those things like, it was so much funnier 10 years ago, but now it's just, you see that every day. So it's not that funny anymore. But there's this feeling of being really upset. And the moon in Scorpio, like, those emotions are very powerful. And then the moon is being ruled over by Mars retrograde in Cancer, and Mars is being ruled by the moon. And so there's this back and forth dynamic of like, I'm feeling really crabby and angry. And then here's that one thing that really sets me off. And now I'm really angry and I'm just going to hold on. And the moon in Scorpio is so good at holding on. It's so good at holding on. Like when, some of you are still really upset at something that happened to you 15 years ago. You might say, oh, I'm over it. But, evidence would support the contrary when it comes to, I was talking to my sister about this. We were talking about, some of the shit that she was going through. And she's like, oh, I'm over that. But then when she was talking about some of the shit she was doing, I was like, you wouldn't be doing this if you were over that. And, it's just the moon in Scorpio is so good at holding on to things. And that's important in terms of like a motivational factor, right? But it's also not good when it's holding on to pain, when it's holding on to resentment, when it's holding on to these narratives, right? Like you might have been a victim when you were a child or as a young adult or whatever. And you have this story that you've created and it's created this identity around yourself around that, and it's all subconscious, and you don't even understand that, because so many people, oh, by the way, when people are like, oh my God, Cameron, I just had someone literally say this, like, I've gotten control of my subconscious. I'm like, boy, you really missed the plot on that one. That's not how that works. It's literally, you don't, like, I've been really diving deep into like my subconscious beliefs lately, just by literally looking at the evidence that is presented in front of me consciously. And I've realized, like, whoa, your subconscious is always validating itself. Why am I going on this? The moon in Scorpio is just this emotional holding on to things, and you're going to find yourself being triggered by something. And I don't like using that word triggered, but I do think it's important, right? Like, for example, like I just got like a Thai massage today, and I have this knot in my back, and the lady like pressed on my back, and it literally like triggered movement in my body. Like that's where the sensitive spot was. So that's why I do like that word. So Tuesday is this kind of like triggering day, and the sun's conjoining Pluto. Are you going to let that overpower you in a sense of fear, in a sense of giving up? Or are you going to find ways to empower? Because again, this is what I like about the sun conjoining Pluto is like, hey, you got to like, for a lot of people, their worst, most painful times are their villain origin story. This is what I love about social media is we're creating these terms to describe shared events that then give us a better frame of understanding them and using them. Like I love the term, just like I was using the term winter arc. Everyone was talking about winter arc in October. And I like that we're all agreeing on that energy. Same thing with villain origin story. It's like there's something that bad that happens to you that then pivots you into doing something different. For certain people, your villain origin story, quote unquote, could be like, I remember when I was a kid, I broke a swing. And at that time, I blamed it on me being fat because I was told I was fat and I was overweight. And that was like a moment for me. There's certain moments where you have enough. And that could be what Tuesday is for you. And we get into Wednesday. Now, Wednesday, it's just the moon and Scorpio making a trine to Saturn and Pisces. And the one thing I want to say about this is the sun is in detriment right now. Our sense of willpower. If you don't feel this motivation and things moving on, that's okay. Right now, it's just like you do your thing. You're waking up. You're going on. The sun is going to get brighter and brighter from here on out. The days are getting longer. I can feel it as a Leo. It's like something like it's like I could just feel any sort of light given to me. But the low energy is there, and I think that continues through Wednesday because on Wednesday the moon is going to be still in Scorpio, making a trine to Saturn. But I like this for just really working through the emotions, right? It is important to sit through discomfort. It is important to like, just because you're uncomfortable, like, it's really crazy is I just quit smoking cigarettes, right? When you're a cigarette smoker and you're taking flights, you might get panicky. But like, for example, when I'm on a flight, say the flight's 4 hours. Well, I could do a 4-hour flight because I already know how long the time is versus when I don't know how long the time is, when I don't know when the uncomfortability is going to end is when I get anxious. And sometimes you just have to let that go. Sometimes you just have to sit through that discomfort, know that eventually you'll have your, quote unquote cigarette, you'll get out of that, but you just have to work through it. And what I've learned is when you can focus in on whatever it is that you're doing, be emotionally present for whatever it is that you're doing, you end up not focusing on that stuff. And so the moon in Scorpio trining Saturn and Pisces is like, you just have to like be present in it. And at some point, if you could do some of the Saturn and Pisces things, which is again, like in my opinion, that can look like just getting your hands busy, being more present in the moment, really kind of tapping into the inside. Like the moon in Scorpio is trining Saturn and Pisces. Do you need to feel this raw emotion in order to better be like Pisces is again if Jupiter, which rules Pisces, is about faith and optimism and belief, and hope and mysticism, but it's yin, it's more internal. Saturn in Pisces is asking us to be more restrictive with it, to have better boundaries with it, to be more mature about it. And so the moon in Scorpio trining that is like, I can feel these emotions and understand why I'm having them, and understand how to use them better, and understand how to not let them like affect me in every single day, because I actually understand where that's coming from. And so there's this level of Wednesday of just working through it. You're going to take your time, and that's what it is. Now, then we get to Thursday, and really everything changes because there's really a lot going on Thursday. And first off, the moon is going to be making a trine to Venus in Pisces. Then it's going to make a trine to Mars in Cancer. Then it's going to go opposite Uranus. Then it's going to sextile Mercury. Then there's going to be a bunch of transits, and then the moon will trine Neptune, and then the moon will enter Sagittarius. So there's a lot of lunar transits on Thursday, okay? The other things that are going on Thursday is Mars is going to make a sextile to Uranus, Mercury is going to go opposite Mars, and then Mercury is going to trine Uranus. It's important for you to sit through your emotions on Wednesday because Thursday is when all of the breakthroughs come in, okay? So Thursday, look, the moon is in Scorpio, it's trining Venus and Pisces. It's kind of like, if you ever had someone who can... Have you ever like been really emotional or upset about something, and then you talk to someone and they kind of like make it really light? Like they don't joke about it, they don't distract you, but they make it really light. And you're like, oh, I guess I could see it that way. And you're not too upset about it. That's that feeling. The moon then makes a trine to Mars in Cancer, where it's kind of like, have you ever realized you were the Karen? Like we've all had Karen moments. I know a lot of you, just given my demographic, have had Karen moments. And we have Karen moments. It's okay. We get upset. We get mad. We get butthurt, and we have to recognize that. And I feel like the moon making that trine to Mars is like, okay, I got butthurt. I got upset. I got triggered. You can acknowledge that. Not everybody's perfect, and especially not you. And then the moon then goes opposite Uranus, where the moon opposite Uranus is going to be like, okay, can you sit in the uncomfortability, even when things are unstable, right? Like, for example, like as a cigarette smoker, when you're that plane, you want that plane to land, and then you're counting down the minutes to smoke that cigarette. Let's say the plane's going to land, and then one of my favorite flights ever was I was landing in Ontario, California, and it's windy. It was the Santa Ana's. It's so windy. I mean, we're literally going like this sideways going down, and I'm thinking like, I know enough about like planes and flying and shit because in a previous life I wanted to be a pilot. We're going down sideways. I mean, it's like we're drifting. I'm like, we're not landing. We're gonna shoot back up. And everyone's like praying, and everyone's like screaming and crying. And I mean, it felt like 10 feet from the ground, and that pilot just we went vertical, and he threw on the fucking thruster, and we just went straight up. And that's what I feel like a lot of Thursday is like this moon shining Mars. Like it was, for a lot of people, it's really scary going sideways. It's like, I don't know, at a certain point, you're not going to fucking crash. And if you do, you die. Like, who cares? I don't know. Plane crashes don't scare me. But then the moon goes opposite Uranus, where it's like, oh, disruption. Oh, we're going to go back up. Can you handle that again? That's what this reminds me of. And then the moon makes a sextile to Mercury. You'll land your plane safely. But I want to talk about these other transits real fast. So Mars is going to make a sextile to Uranus, and then Mercury is going to make an opposition to Mars, and then Mercury is going to trine Uranus. All of these transits are kind of the same thing, which is like creative problem solving. So like if Mars is retrograde in Cancer, sextiling Uranus, a sextile is like a very helpful thing. Like it's not the most solution oriented, but it's like, oh, this will work. This will do for now. This helps. And it's Uranus, right? It's innovation, it's liberation, whatever. And Mars is like, I have to be protective. I have to be defensive. I am working on, protecting an inner part of myself. I can't fight. Again, this is why I'm not glad about the LA fires, okay? I got to watch what I say there because people are going to be like, oh, people freak the fuck. You say anything slightly wrong on fucking YouTube and they'll write a whole dissertation about why you're the worst fucking person ever. And it's just get a fucking life. But I talked a lot about Mars retrograding Cancer, about when it comes to fighting fires, you just got to let them burn a lot of the time and protect the homes. Now, there's only so much you can do, right? Like when there's a huge wind gust, like you just gotta let that shit burn and do what you can to protect. And that's a lot of Mars retrograding Cancer. And I look at Mars making that sextile to Uranus is like, you might find a creative way of figuring that out on Thursday. But then Mercury goes opposite Mars, where there's this hard conversation that has to happen. Mercury in Capricorn is like brass tacks, and Mars retrograde in Cancer is like, you ever like you've been fucking off at work, you haven't been doing that thing that you know you need to do, and your boss is like, hey, we need to talk, and you're like, fuck, I know what we're gonna talk about. And they're not really mad, but they're just like, hey, like, I like you, but you're doing these things that go against our policy. What are you gonna do? Are you gonna flash out? Are you gonna be angry at them for doing their job? Like, a lot of the Mercury Mars opposition is a hard conversation. There's an adult in the room, and then there's a baby in the room. And how do we handle those conversations, right? For a lot of that might be yourself. Like, you might have to, like, this is not something I always like bringing up, because I do think a lot of this stuff is overused, which is like the inner child stuff, which is like, you got some inner core wounds. You don't really ever get over those, because that's how life is. But how do we address that? And what I like about Mercury in Capricorn is, like, it doesn't have to be harsh. It doesn't have to be, super empathetic or get someone to like continue a behavior. It can just be it just is what it is. Like, Mercury in Capricorn's like, hey, this behavior gets you this result, and I don't think that's a good idea. And so I look at Mercury opposite Mars as like, you might have to have a real talk with yourself on Thursday and just be like, hey, and you have to address that inner child, that you're like, hey, I'm being this way and maybe it needs to change. But then right after that, Mercury makes a trine to Uranus, where there is this like, wow, it can be that easy. It can be that simple. It's sometimes so much easier and simple than you ever thought. And then the moon trines Neptune, which I feel like the moon trine Neptune is like so different from all of this. But then the moon ingresses into Sagittarius. So think about everything I just said. Moon trines Venus, then trines Mars, then opposite Uranus, then sextile Mercury. Mars sextiles Uranus. Mercury goes opposite Mars. Mercury trines Uranus. And then the moon enters Sag, where there's like, after all of this emotional pinball stuff, we get this like exciting new forward movement feeling on Thursday. So Thursday's quite the roller coaster, to be honest with you. And this is why I was saying, like, this week, I can't do this anymore also without thinking about Trump. And I've been Trump. I said, I got stuck doing a Trump impression a couple months ago. And this has stuck with me, is this hand movement. And I can't not do it anymore. I'm trying not to do it, but it is really funny. Catch yourself doing this. You'll never forgive yourself. But the moon goes into Sag, where if the moon is about our emotions, it's in Sag, it's ruled by Jupiter. There's like this optimism, there's this freedom. So Thursdays, again, just feels, the beginning of the day, you're going to feel one way, and at the end of the day, you're going to feel completely different and probably a lot better. And I think this is where the week really has the vibe shift. We get to Friday, and then on Friday, the moon will be in Sag. It's going to make that sextile to Pluto, and then it's going to go opposite Jupiter. I just think this is feeling like that sense of freedom. I had a few analogies in my head, but they're not going to work. Feeling that sense of freedom. The moon in Sag opposite Jupiter and Gemini. You know what I like about that is seeing the big picture and being optimistic, even when Jupiter is like in detriment, right? Like, Jupiter's in detriment in Gemini, where Jupiter's about optimism and hope, but it's like so hell-bent on it being logical and rational. And you're like, well, I could be hopeful if it was just this way, or if I could just get this. The moon in Sag is just like, I don't need all of that nonsense. Like, I'm just going to be hopeful anyway. Like, it doesn't have to make sense. You don't have to have, like, the whole point of faith is to like believe it before you see it. And I like Friday for just feeling it. It's not like, oh, I will have faith when blank. I will trust this person when they blank. You either trust or you have faith, or you don't. That's it. And that's what Friday's about. Then we get to Saturday. That fun lasts for a minute, for one day. We get to Saturday, the moon's going to be in Sag, and it's going to make a square to Saturn and then a square to Venus. But we do get a highlight, which is Venus making a trine to Mars. Quite a bit to talk about here. The moon making a square to Saturn is going nowhere fast. But the moon then squaring Venus is like, I don't think you want to go somewhere fast. Like, for me, I'm just such a Sag rising, where it's hard for me to be like, everything Sag is good. But like, it's really easy to like run through things really quickly. But Venus and Pisces kind of like makes you try to appreciate what's in front of you. Like, it's like going to like an art, what do you call that? Not an art museum, an art show, an art thing. Like, you go see art. Like, for me, I'm like, cool. Like, I just walk by really quickly. But then if you sit there and you're looking at it like that, it's like that scene from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Just like get lost in it. You're not going to go anywhere fast. You don't have anywhere to go, or at least if you have somewhere to go, you're not going to get there quickly. So you might as well kind of enjoy that somber moment. The moon is contacting Venus, which we like, but it is this kind of square where it is a little bit like, not exactly what our body like anticipated on, but we like it. Does that make sense? But then we have Venus trining Mars. And I like that the moon makes a square to Venus and is like contacting Venus for the majority of the rest of the day on Saturday. And then Venus makes this trine to Mars. I like Venus-Mars trines, but this one's in particular is really weird because Venus is super exalted at this point. Mars is really debilitated, really debilitated. I can't think of, there's got to be a Disney movie for this. This isn't Beauty and the Beast, but it's very, Venus is like fun and pleasure and hope, and Mars is just like downtrodden. Like Mars is like fights and conflicts. It's in Cancer. There's like this, like, I've been defeated. I can't do this. And when you have Mars and Venus trining, Mars is about our actions and Venus is about our like values and our desires. And they're like in harmony with one another. Like, that sounds weird to say, but there's a lot of the times where we have certain values and have certain desires, but our actions don't line up with it. You value, having a stable income, but you end up quitting every job you have. You value having being healthy and looking good, but you end up eating shit and not going to the gym. Like, that's how Venus and Mars can get in each other's way. But when you have Mars and Venus making a trine to one another, it's like what I want, what I value is in harmony with what I'm doing. And so you have to read that through like, okay, but Mars is retrograde in Cancer. I'm doing this protective and this defensive, moving backwards on things. And Venus and Pisces is like, because like the why is like, because I want these things. And I think you have to really look at your chart to understand this a little bit better. For me, maybe it's hard for me to talk about water transits all the time because like Scorpio, Pisces, and Cancer rule my 8th, 12th, and 4th house. So they're not always accessible to me in the most obvious ways. But that's the way I would look at Saturday. And then we get to Sunday. The moon is going to make a square to Neptune before it leaves Sagittarius, and then the moon's going to enter Capricorn. We have two highlights, which is Mercury is going to sextile Neptune and Venus is going to sextile Uranus. It's like those are both highlights and they're both not highlights, because what's going to happen is on Sunday, the moon is going to be in Sag. It's going to make a square to Neptune. There's a little bit of this confusion, like what's next? Where are we going? And then the moon's going to enter Capricorn, lock in by Sunday evening, Sunday afternoon. Mercury making a sextile to Neptune is really good for like creative visionary stuff. And what I wrote down too was like loophole thinking. Like Mercury sextiling Neptune is kind of like, when you're reading the terms and conditions and then you're looking it over and you go, well, they don't bring that up. Like, have you ever been in a restaurant or anywhere and they have a sign and the sign is very specific? And that's because someone did that and they weren't clear about that. So Mercury sextiling Neptune is very loophole thinking of like, where can things be deceivable, whether you are being deceived or you can do the deceiving. Now, I don't like even putting a moral compass on deception, right? Because that's not really, I think, a lot of morality. There's certain rules and things that are objective, and then there's a lot of things that are subjective, right? I look at the Mercury Neptune sextiles, there's an opportunity to be very creative. And I think creativity is the better phrase here to use, whether that's through your art or, again, through your plan. What goals do you have for the year and what's your plan to go through them? Can you be creative on how you go through that? Is there a loophole to them that you may not even see before? Is there a loophole to the problem that you have faced in front of you that you're not even seeing? That it's so clever and so, and I don't think it's about being deceptive as in like, oh, you should lie. That's not even what I'm saying, because I don't even think that has to be about this. It could be about that if you want to be a liar. But Napoleon Dynamite speaks for me when I say that. Parker, roll the clip.
I told Gus we'd be there, Richie. And if we don't go, that makes me a liar. And that's not what I'm about.
But we also have Venus making a sextile to Uranus and Venus and Pisces sextiling Uranus. Just like exciting, new, shiny object, trying something new. It's just very, again, we're touching buttons and fucking whiz bangs are happening. Like there's something just kind of like, you have one thing going on in your life, but Venus sextiling Uranus is like, hey, I'm going to try this, and this ends up working out really well. Now, when we get to next week, this is like really the lowest week this week, but next week is like, all right, we really start building up, because next week Mercury goes into Aquarius. Mercury conjoins Pluto. New moon in Aquarius. The sun trines Jupiter. Venus enters shadow next week. Venus conjoins Neptune. Venus conjoins the North Node. I can make a whole video about Venus and shadow, which I will. Venus conjoining Neptune and Venus conjoining North Node. And Uranus stations direct. So much happens next week. You need to tune in. If you haven't subscribed already, make sure you subscribe to the channel. If, by the way, I've never said this, if you're listening to this on Apple or on Spotify, leave your boy a review. I was looking at this. I have way more listeners than I thought. I don't have any reviews really. And I was like, hey, shoot me some reviews. It actually helps me out. I would appreciate that. And with that being said, I'm going to leave that off and I'll be seeing you guys next week.